The U.S. Supreme Court says it will not hear an appeal in President Donald Trump's sexual abuse and defamation case right here in New York. Now, the president was hoping to overturn a verdict in that case that awarded E. Jean Carroll $5 million back in 2023. In 2019, Carroll alleged President Trump raped her in a department store in the 90s. She later filed a civil suit, including the allegations and that he had defamed her in his denials. A judge found the president had sexually abused and defamed Carroll before a jury handed down the financial decision. President Trump's team argues the judge allowed improper testimony in the case, but the Supreme Court rejected their efforts Monday, not expanding on their decision as to why. Now, the president is appealing another case involving Carroll. She was awarded more than $83 million in another defamation verdict in 2024. The president's team is fighting that decision in the lower courts. Reporting in New York.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. Adams is here. The Supreme Court rejected Trump's final emergency appeal, ending his legal maneuvering on multiple fronts. Criminal sentencing, tariffs, and financial penalties will now proceed. The curt denial signals the court sees his arguments as frivolous delays, and there is nothing left to stop the consequences. They are not giving Trump more time, not allowing more delays, not treating him differently than any other defendant. And that is huge because Trump's entire legal strategy has been built on delay, on filing endless appeals, on using the slowness of the system to avoid consequences. But when the Supreme Court refuses to hear your appeal, when they just let lower court rulings stand, that strategy fails completely. There is nowhere else to go, no higher court to appeal to. It is over. The criminal sentencing in the New York hush money case is now proceeding. The Supreme Court specifically noted that the sentencing will not significantly impact Trump's ability to serve as president because the trial court plans to impose an unconditional discharge, meaning Trump will not go to jail, will not be on probation, but he will have a criminal conviction on his record forever, a felony conviction that can never be erased.
Are coming on the air with breaking news about President-elect Donald Trump and this morning's sentencing in his hush money case. At a hearing just moments ago in Manhattan Supreme Court, New York Judge Juan Merchan issued his decision. The sentence, unconditional discharge covering all 34 counts. Here's what that means. No prison time, no fine. As expected, this is the most lenient sentence possible. Mr. Trump was not there in person, but he did appear virtually on a live stream into the court just before the sentence was handed down, calling this, in his words, a very terrible experience. The proceedings were not on camera, but there is audio. You are looking at a still image from inside the courtroom. We do expect to see the audio released later on this morning. Remember, Mr. Trump was convicted last May on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in what prosecutors said was an attempt to cover up a $130,000 hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Again, this morning, Mr. Trump has denied any wrongdoing.
That is politically and personally devastating because Trump has spent his entire life avoiding being labeled a criminal. He has fought every allegation, has claimed every prosecution is a witch hunt, and now, officially, permanently, he is a convicted felon. That is his legacy. That is how history will remember him, and there is nothing he can do about it. The Supreme Court made sure of that by refusing to block the sentencing. The tariff ruling is equally devastating. Trump imposed sweeping global tariffs, claimed he had emergency powers to do it, said the International Emergency Economic Powers Act gave him authority, and courts at every level said no, said that is not what the law means, said Trump manufactured an emergency to bypass Congress, said the tariffs are illegal and have to be struck down. Trump appealed to the Supreme Court, asked them to save his signature economic policy, and the court said no. Let the lower court ruling stand, meaning billions of dollars in tariffs have to be refunded, meaning Trump's economic policy is invalidated, meaning he does not have the executive authority he claimed, and there is no appeal left, no way to reverse it. The tariffs are gone, and they are not coming back.
At this point, a federal judge has just ruled that thousands of businesses should receive refunds for tariffs. This comes, as you might remember, after the Supreme Court's ruling that basically illegitimize the Trump administration's tariffs. This is a multi-billion-dollar setback for the White House because it's ordered the Trump administration to start refunding these tariff costs, and more than 2,000 companies have filed lawsuits seeking refunds. Many of them are big businesses like Costco and FedEx, and they're trying to benefit from some of the legal challenges issued by small businesses. This is also something to keep in mind because this order is directing U.S. Customs and Border Protection to begin recalculating duties importers paid and to figure out exactly how much money needs to be returned. On top of returning tariffs paid, estimates range from $130 billion upwards of $175 billion. The government revealed in a new court filing it's also going to pay interest on the refunds, estimated to be nearly $700 million per month, which is really just incredible. So,
legal experts are calling this the final word from the judicial branch. The Supreme Court has spoken. Lower courts can now enforce their rulings without fear of being overturned. Prosecutors can proceed with sentencing. Civil courts can collect financial penalties. And Trump has no legal recourse, cannot file another appeal, cannot claim he is waiting for the Supreme Court to decide. The Supreme Court has decided. They have rejected his appeals. And now consequences follow. Those consequences are massive. Criminal conviction, billions in tariff refunds, financial penalties that threaten his business, and the collapse of his claims to expanded executive authority. All happening at once, all unavoidable, all permanent. The decision also signals something important for Trump's other cases. Because if the Supreme Court will not intervene to block sentencing in the New York case, why would they intervene in other cases? If they will not save his tariffs, why would they save other executive actions? The answer is, they will not.
The Federal Circuit Court of Appeals today denying the Trump administration's request to delay next steps in the tariff refund process. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
In a blow to the Trump administration on Monday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit has sent the tariff case back to a lower court for further proceedings on refunds. The decision, written in a one-page order, denies the government's request that an existing pause be extended for at least 4 months. The court didn't give an explanation for the ruling. The plaintiffs, a group of small businesses, had urged the court to move the case along so they could pursue their refunds. The ruling comes after the Supreme Court's lengthy and complicated opinion 2 weeks ago, in which it ruled that President Trump couldn't use an emergency powers law to impose sweeping global tariffs.
Trump's delay tactics, his immunity claims, his arguments for special treatment, none of them are working anymore. Not at any level of the judiciary. That means his other cases proceed too. Other prosecutions move forward. Other financial penalties get enforced. Other policy defeats become permanent because the Supreme Court has made clear they are not going to save Trump, not going to give him special treatment, not going to allow endless delays. The time for accountability has arrived and Trump cannot stop it. Congressional Democrats are celebrating, calling this a watershed moment for accountability, saying it proves no one is above the law, using it to justify their investigations and oversight. Republicans are scrambling, some defending Trump, some distancing themselves, some just staying quiet because they do not know what to say. This is not a decision they can spin. This is not a loss they can blame on one biased judge. This is the Supreme Court, the court with a conservative supermajority. The court where Trump appointed 3 justices and they just rejected him, just said his appeals lack merit, just left him with no way out. Buckle up, because we are about to break down exactly what this ruling means and why Trump's legal position has never been worse. All right, let us dig into the specifics of what the Supreme Court actually did, because the details matter, the reasoning matters, and the implications for Trump's future matter enormously. We start with the criminal sentencing case. Trump was convicted in New York on 34 felony counts related to falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments. After the conviction, Trump's lawyers filed endless motions to delay sentencing, claimed he could not be sentenced while running for president, claimed it would interfere with his campaign, claimed it was politically motivated. When those arguments failed in lower courts, they appealed to the Supreme Court, filed an emergency application, asking the court to block the sentencing. The Supreme Court said no, denied the application. In their brief order, they explained why. They noted that the trial court plans to impose an unconditional discharge, meaning no jail time, no probation, just a conviction on the record. They said that will not significantly impact Trump's ability to serve as president. So there is no reason to delay, no emergency that justifies Supreme Court intervention. The sentencing can proceed. That reasoning is important because it shows the court is not treating Trump differently than any other defendant. If you are convicted, you get sentenced. That is how the system works. The fact that you are famous, or that you won an election, or that sentencing might be politically inconvenient, none of that matters. The law applies equally. Trump has to face sentencing just like anyone else would. That sentencing, even though it is just an unconditional discharge, is still a conviction. Still a felony on Trump's permanent record. Still something that will define his legacy. Trump is not just being sentenced to no jail time. He is being sentenced to history remembering him as a convicted felon, as someone who was found guilty by a jury of his peers, as someone who committed crimes. That can never be undone, can never be appealed away, is permanent. The tariff case is different but equally significant. Trump imposed global tariffs claiming emergency authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. This law gives the president certain powers during genuine national emergencies, but Trump stretched the definition, declared that trade imbalances were an emergency, that America's trade deficit threatened national security, and therefore he could impose massive tariffs without congressional approval. Courts at every level rejected that argument, said the law does not give the president unlimited authority to reshape trade policy, said Congress never intended for emergency powers to be used this way, said Trump manufactured an emergency to bypass constitutional requirements. They struck down the tariffs, ordered them invalidated, ordered billions in refunds to businesses that paid them. Trump appealed to the Supreme Court and the court declined to hear the case. Let the lower court ruling stand. That is devastating for multiple reasons. First, it invalidates Trump's signature economic policy. The tariffs were central to his economic message. They were supposed to protect American workers and bring manufacturing back. Now they are gone, declared illegal, wiped away, and billions of dollars have to be refunded. Money that Trump's administration collected and spent. Money that now has to be returned. That creates massive budget problems, creates questions about how to fund programs that were built on tariff revenue, creates a fiscal crisis on top of a legal crisis. Second, it establishes precedent about presidential power. The court is saying presidents cannot manufacture emergencies to bypass Congress, cannot use vague statutory language to claim unlimited authority, cannot reshape major policy areas without clear congressional authorization. That precedent applies to everything Trump might try to do, every other claim of executive authority, every other attempt to govern through emergency declarations. The court has drawn a line and Trump cannot cross it. The Supreme Court also sent a signal about Trump's immunity claims because in refusing to block the criminal sentencing, they implicitly rejected Trump's argument that he has special immunity, that he cannot be prosecuted or sentenced like ordinary citizens, that his status as president or former president puts him above the law. The court said no to all of that, said Trump gets sentenced like anyone else, said there is no special immunity, said the criminal justice system applies to everyone. That rejection of immunity claims is going to affect Trump's other cases because if he does not have immunity from state prosecution, why would he have immunity from federal prosecution? If he can be sentenced for crimes committed before his presidency, why could he not be prosecuted for crimes committed during his presidency? The answers are becoming clear. He does not have immunity. He can be prosecuted. He can face consequences. The Supreme Court is not going to save him. Legal experts are emphasizing that this is the end of Trump's legal options. When the Supreme Court declines to hear your case, that is it. There is no appeal beyond the Supreme Court. No higher authority. The lower court rulings become final. In Trump's case, that means criminal conviction stands. Tariffs are invalidated. Financial penalties are enforceable. There is nothing Trump can do legally to change any of it. His only options now are political. Try to use his position as president to influence enforcement. Try to get Congress to pass laws that override court decisions. Try to pardon himself or have his Justice Department drop cases. But legally through the courts, he is out of moves, has no appeals left, has no legal arguments that have not been rejected, has exhausted every pathway. That is unprecedented. No president in modern history has faced this level of judicial rejection, has had the Supreme Court close the door so completely. The financial implications are staggering. The tariff refunds alone could be tens of billions of dollars. Money that has to come from somewhere, either through budget cuts or through borrowing or through finding new revenue. That creates political problems because nobody wants their programs cut to pay for Trump's illegal tariffs. Nobody wants to borrow more money to refund businesses. Finding new revenue means raising taxes or cutting elsewhere, all politically toxic options. Beyond the tariffs, there are the civil judgments against Trump personally. Hundreds of millions in penalties for fraud, for sexual assault, for defamation. Those penalties are now enforceable, can be collected, can result in asset seizures if Trump does not pay. Trump's ability to pay is unclear. His wealth is mostly in real estate, not liquid. Liquidating properties to pay judgments damages his business, damages his brand, damages his net worth. The financial consequences of these Supreme Court decisions ripple out in every direction, affect the federal budget, affect Trump's personal finances, affect his business empire all at once. The timing makes this even more significant, because this is happening as Trump prepares to take office, as he is forming his administration, as he is planning his agenda. Instead of focusing on policy, instead of planning initiatives, he is dealing with legal disasters, dealing with having to refund billions in tariffs, dealing with criminal sentencing, dealing with financial penalties. All of that is a massive distraction, takes up time and energy and political capital, makes it harder to govern, harder to maintain support, harder to project strength, because presidents are supposed to win, supposed to succeed, supposed to make things happen. Trump is losing, is facing defeat after defeat in court, is being told by the Supreme Court that he has no way out. That perception of weakness, that image of someone who's corner, that is politically devastating. Republicans are struggling to respond. Some are attacking the courts, claiming judicial overreach, claiming Trump is being treated unfairly. But those attacks ring hollow when it is the Supreme Court making the decisions, when it is a court with a conservative majority, when it is justices Trump himself appointed. Hard to claim bias under those circumstances. Other Republicans are just staying quiet, not defending Trump, but not attacking him either, just trying to avoid the issue, hoping it goes away, but it is not going away. These Supreme Court decisions are final, are permanent, are going to keep generating consequences and headlines and political problems for months and years. Democrats are using every bit of it, running ads about Trump, the convicted felon, about Trump's illegal tariffs, about Trump losing at every level of the judiciary, about accountability finally arriving. Those messages are resonating with voters who are tired of chaos, who want leaders who follow the law, who care about whether powerful people face consequences. So, let us break down what this Supreme Court ruling means, why it leaves Trump with no way out, what the implications are for his presidency, his legal future, his finances, and his political standing. This is not just another legal setback. This is the Supreme Court closing every door, rejecting every appeal, leaving Trump with no options, and the consequences are going to shape everything that happens next. First, the criminal conviction is now permanent. Trump will be sentenced, will have a felony on his record forever, and there is no appeal left, no way to overturn it, no legal maneuver that can erase it. That conviction defines Trump's legacy, means history will remember him as a criminal, as someone who committed felonies and was convicted by a jury. For someone who has built his entire identity on being a winner, on being successful, on being above the fray, that is devastating. That is a permanent stain that can never be removed. It affects everything. Affects how people view him, affects his business relationships, affects his political standing, because convicted felons face stigma, face questions about their judgment and character, face barriers in business and politics. Trump now carries that label forever. Second, the tariff ruling invalidates Trump's economic policy. His signature achievement, the thing he campaigned on, the policy that was supposed to bring back American manufacturing, the Supreme Court said it is illegal, said Trump did not have authority, said the tariffs have to go, and billions have to be refunded. That is not just a policy defeat, that is a complete repudiation of Trump's approach to executive power. The court is saying you cannot govern this way, cannot manufacture emergencies, cannot bypass Congress, cannot claim unlimited authority. That repudiation affects everything else Trump might want to do, every other executive action he might take, every other policy he might implement. If the tariffs were illegal, what else might be illegal? What other actions might courts strike down? The answer is potentially a lot. That makes Trump's presidency constrained, limited, unable to act unilaterally the way he wants. For someone who sees the presidency as unlimited power, that is infuriating and paralyzing. Third, the financial exposure is massive. Trump faces billions in tariff refunds, hundreds of millions in civil judgments, asset seizure risks. The Supreme Court has made clear all of that is enforceable. Courts can collect, can take property, can force liquidation. Trump cannot stop it through appeals, cannot delay indefinitely, has to actually pay or face consequences. That threatens his business empire, threatens properties that bear his name, threatens his wealth. Wealth is core to Trump's identity, to how he sees himself and wants others to see him. Watching that wealth be taken by courts, by judgments, by enforcement actions, that is personally devastating. Beyond the practical financial problems, beyond the business implications, it is an attack on Trump's self-image, on his sense of who he is. That is going to affect his behavior, make him more desperate, more willing to take risks, more likely to do things that create new problems. Fourth, the precedent for other cases. The Supreme Court's rejection of Trump's appeals signals that similar tactics will not work elsewhere. Immunity claims will fail, delay strategies will be rejected. Courts at every level should proceed with prosecutions and civil cases without fear of being overturned. That is going to embolden prosecutors, going to make them more aggressive, more willing to bring charges, more confident that convictions will stand because they know the Supreme Court is not going to save Trump, is not going to overturn their cases, is not going to allow endless delays. Expect more indictments, more trials, more convictions, all proceeding more quickly, all resulting in consequences that Trump cannot appeal away because the Supreme Court has made clear they are done giving Trump special treatment, done allowing him to abuse the system, done letting him delay accountability. Fifth, the political damage. Trump's brand has always been built on winning, on success, on being someone who beats the system. This Supreme Court ruling shows him losing, shows him defeated at every level, shows him out of options. That damages the brand, makes Trump look weak, makes him look like a loser. For his supporters who are invested in the image of Trump as a fighter who always wins, that is disillusioning, makes them question their support, makes them wonder if Trump is still the right leader. For swing voters, for independents, it confirms what they suspected, that Trump is a criminal, that his policies are illegal, that he is corrupt, and the courts are finally holding him accountable. That perception shift is going to cost Trump politically, going to make it harder to govern, harder to pass legislation, harder to maintain party support, because politicians do not want to be associated with someone who is losing, who is facing criminal sentencing, who is being rejected by the Supreme Court. The GOP reaction is divided. Some still defending Trump, claiming he is being persecuted. Others are distancing themselves, questioning whether Trump can lead, wondering if the party needs a different direction. Those divisions weaken Republicans, make it harder to unify, harder to govern, harder to win elections. Voters do not trust divided parties, do not believe parties that cannot agree on basic questions about their own leader. Democrats are exploiting those divisions, peeling off moderate Republicans, building coalitions, passing legislation, using Trump's legal disasters to strengthen their own position. That is going to continue, going to accelerate as more consequences arrive. As Trump faces sentencing, as tariff refunds create budget problems, as financial penalties get enforced, every new development creates more division, more opportunity for Democrats, more problems for Trump and the GOP. The international implications are significant. America's allies and adversaries are watching. Seeing an American president rejected by his own Supreme Court, seeing American policies declared illegal, seeing chaos and dysfunction, that affects America's standing in the world, affects whether other countries trust American leadership, whether they want to make deals with an administration that is in constant legal turmoil, whether they believe American commitments are reliable. The answer is increasingly no. Other countries are hedging, making alternative plans, building relationships that do not depend on America because they see an administration that is weak, that is distracted by legal problems, that cannot even get its Supreme Court to support its policies. That loss of international standing has real consequences for trade, for security, for diplomacy, for America's ability to shape world events. The historical legacy is becoming clear. Trump will be remembered as the president who was rejected by the Supreme Court, who was convicted of felonies, whose signature policies were declared illegal, who faced criminal sentencing while in office. That is the legacy. That is what history books will say. That legacy matters. affects how future generations understand this period, affects what lessons are drawn, affects whether Trump is seen as a leader or as a cautionary tale. Based on this Supreme Court ruling, based on the complete rejection of Trump's legal arguments, history is going to judge him harshly, going to see him as someone who abused power, who tried to place himself above the law, who failed when the legal system finally held him accountable. What can Trump still do? Even though he is out of legal options, he still has political power, still is president, still controls executive branch agencies. He could try to use that power, could try to have his Justice Department drop federal cases, could try to pardon himself, could try to use executive orders to undermine court rulings, could try to rally his base to pressure judges and prosecutors. But all of those options create new problems, new controversies, new legal challenges. They probably do not work because state cases cannot be pardoned by federal authority. Court rulings cannot be ignored without consequences. Rallying supporters to intimidate judges is obstruction. Trump's political options are limited, and using them just creates more problems, more scandals, more evidence of abuse of power. The bottom line is that the Supreme Court has left Trump with no way out. No appeals left, no legal arguments that work, no delays available, just consequences. Criminal sentencing, tariff refunds, financial penalties, policy defeats. Trump has to face all of it. Cannot escape, cannot delay, cannot appeal. This is accountability. This is what happens when the legal system finally works. When courts at every level say enough, when even the Supreme Court says no more delays. Trump is discovering that there are limits. That power does not make you immune, that eventually consequences arrive. When they do, when you have exhausted every appeal, when you are out of options, you have to face them. That is where Trump is now, facing consequences with no way out. What happens next is going to define his presidency and his legacy. The judicial branch has spoken with one voice. From the lowest trial courts to the highest court in the land, the message has been consistent and clear. Trump is not above the law. His arguments lack merit. His delays will not be tolerated. His appeals will not be heard. The era of endless litigation is over. The era of accountability has begun. For Trump, that means facing the reality of his situation. He is a convicted felon. His policies have been struck down. His finances are under siege. His political capital is depleted. His party is divided. His international standing is diminished. His legacy is tarnished. All of these consequences are flowing from the Supreme Court's decisions. All of them are permanent. All of them are unavoidable. Trump built his political career on the idea that he could do whatever he wanted, that the rules did not apply to him, that he was above the law. The Supreme Court has now made clear that this is not the case. The rules do apply. The law does apply. Accountability does exist. And Trump, like every other citizen, must face the consequences of his actions. This is a moment of reckoning, not just for Trump personally, but for the entire country. It is a moment that tests whether the system of checks and balances actually works, whether the courts can hold a president accountable, whether the rule of law means what it says. The answer, from the Supreme Court's rulings, is yes. The system works, the courts will hold presidents accountable. The rule of law does mean what it says, and Trump, despite all his power, all his wealth, all his influence, cannot escape it. The implications for future presidents are just as significant. Any future president who might be tempted to stretch executive authority, to manufacture emergencies, to bypass Congress, to claim immunity from prosecution, will look at this moment and think twice. The Supreme Court has made clear that there are limits, that courts will enforce those limits, that accountability will eventually arrive. That is a powerful deterrent. That is a crucial protection for American democracy. The Supreme Court has done its job. It has upheld the rule of law. It has rejected the claim that any president is above the law. And in doing so, it has preserved the constitutional balance of power that is essential to American governance. Stay tuned, because what happens next, how Trump responds to these consequences, how his party reacts, how the country moves forward, all of that is still unfolding. But one thing is certain, the Supreme Court has spoken. Trump has no way out, and the consequences are coming.